Most of my life was shaped by a simple fear that someone, somewhere, might not like me. My name is Harold. I'm 82 years old, and it has taken me more than 4 decades to admit that I wasted most of my adult life trying to be liked by everyone around me. When I was young, I didn't see it as fear. I saw it as being agreeable, cooperative, easy to work with. Teachers described me as polite. Employers called me reliable. Friends said I was the reasonable one. I wore those labels like medals. What I did not realize was that beneath that pleasant surface, I was constantly adjusting myself to fit whatever room I walked into. If a group laughed at a joke I did not find funny, I laughed louder. If someone expressed an opinion I disagreed with, I nodded. If a decision needed to be made and I had doubts, I kept them to myself. I believed this made life smoother. I believed it kept conflict away. And for a while, it did. In my 20s, I entered the workforce eager to be appreciated. I stayed late, volunteered for extra tasks, and agreed with supervisors even when I knew they were wrong. I told myself that humility would be rewarded. The truth is that I was not being humble. I was afraid of disapproval. That pattern followed me into my 30s and 40s. When colleagues spoke over me in meetings, I let them. When credit for my work was quietly taken by someone else, I convinced myself it did not matter. I wanted to be seen as easygoing, the kind of man who caused no trouble. At home, it was the same story. I loved my wife, but I avoided difficult conversations because I did not want her to see me as stubborn or critical. If something bothered me, I swallowed it. If I needed something, I minimized it. I thought I was protecting harmony. In reality, I was protecting my image. The strange thing about trying to be liked is that people often do like you. They describe you as kind, calm, dependable. And yet, something inside remains unsettled because the version of you they like is carefully edited. In my 40s, I was offered a promotion that required relocating to another city. It was a role I had quietly hoped for, one that matched my skills and ambitions. But accepting it would have meant disappointing a colleague who had seniority and expected the position. I told myself that loyalty mattered more than advancement. I declined the offer. I still remember the look on my wife's face when I told her. She did not argue. She simply asked, was that really your decision? At the time, I answered confidently, yes, it was. But years later, I understand that it was not a decision based on principle. It was based on discomfort. I could not tolerate the idea that someone might resent me. Over time, that habit of self-erasure became automatic. I adapted to whoever I was with. With assertive personalities, I softened. With dominant voices, I retreated. I mistook flexibility for virtue. I did not notice that my own preferences were becoming harder and harder to identify. The cost did not appear all at once. It revealed itself slowly. I would leave social gatherings feeling drained without knowing why. I would sit alone in my car before going inside the house, gathering myself as if I had been performing all day. I began to feel like a supporting character in my own life. In my 50s, something happened that forced me to confront this pattern. A younger colleague joined our department. He was confident in a way that unsettled me. He disagreed openly. He set boundaries. He said no without apology. At first, I judged him as arrogant, but I watched carefully and I noticed something else. People respected him. They did not always agree with him. Some found him difficult, but no one ignored him. No one took his work without acknowledgement. He wasn't universally liked, but he was clearly valued. That distinction troubled me. I realized that I had spent decades confusing being liked with being respected. I had avoided the discomfort of disagreement so thoroughly that I had also avoided being fully seen. The turning point came when my daughter, then in her early 20s, confronted me after a family gathering. She said, "Dad, you're different with everyone. I never know what you actually think." Her words were not angry, they were honest. And they pierced deeper than any criticism I had ever received at work. My own child did not know who I was beneath the politeness. That night I lay awake and traced the pattern backward through my life. I saw how many decisions had been filtered through one silent question. Will this make people like me more? I saw opportunities decline, opinions withheld, boundaries erased. I saw how often I had mistaken approval for connection. Real change did not happen overnight. At 60, I began experimenting with small acts of honesty. If I disagreed in a meeting, I voiced it calmly. If I felt tired, I declined invitations instead of inventing excuses. If I needed something in my marriage, I said it plainly. The first few times were uncomfortable. I expected rejection. I braced for conflict. Instead, something surprising happened. Some people pushed back. Yes, a few relationships grew distant, but the ones that remained became sturdier. I began to understand that when you stop trying to be liked by everyone, you create space to be known by someone. In my 70s, retirement stripped away many of the roles that had defined me. Without the daily performance of competence and agreeableness, I had to confront myself more directly. I asked simple questions I had avoided for years. What do I actually enjoy? What do I believe? Where do I stand when there is no audience? Those were not easy questions for a man my age, but they were liberating. For the first time, my days felt less like, negotiations and more like choices. Now, at 82, when I look back, I do not regret being kind. I do not regret caring about others. What I regret is the fear that disguised itself as kindness. I regret the years spent editing my personality to fit expectations I never examined. Trying to be liked is subtle. It feels harmless. It often earns praise. But over decades, it can quietly hollow you out. You become fluent in reading others and illiterate in reading yourself. If I could speak to the younger version of me, I would not tell him to be bold or rebellious. I would tell him something simpler. Discomfort will not destroy you. Being misunderstood will not end your life. Disagreement is not the same as rejection. And to you, whoever is listening, I would say this gently. Notice how often your decisions are shaped by the desire to be approved of. Notice when you soften your voice before you have even spoken. Notice when you agree too quickly. You do not need to be harsh, to be honest. You do not need to be liked by everyone to be worthy. In fact, the moment you stop trying to win universal approval is often the moment you begin to live more truthfully. At 82, I have fewer years ahead of me than behind me. That clarity has removed much of the fear. I no longer measure my words by how acceptable they will sound. I measure them by whether they are real. 40 years is a long time to spend performing. I cannot recover those decades, but I can offer this reflection in the hope that you will not wait as long as I did to understand that being liked is pleasant, but being authentic is peaceful.